die. I thought I'd never make it out of this storm.
You're safe now. Stay close. I'll get you home.
Lonely Hunter thought no one would ever want him until the most powerful woman proposed to him. The people of Silver Creek would talk about that day for years. Some swore they had never seen a crowd become so quiet. The morning had begun like any other in the frontier town. Ranchers tied their horses outside the general store. Merchants opened their doors. Farmers arrived with wagons of supplies. By noon, nearly everyone had gathered in the square after hearing that Sarah Whitmore, the most powerful woman in the territory, intended to make an important announcement. Sarah was known throughout the region. She owned vast ranchlands, controlled profitable trade routes, and employed dozens of workers. Wealthy businessmen admired her. Ambitious politicians sought her support. More than one respected ranch owner had asked for her hand in marriage. She had refused every one of them. As the crowd waited, guesses spread. She's probably buying more land. Maybe she's running for office. Nobody expected what came next. Standing on the courthouse steps, Sarah thanked the townspeople for coming. Then her eyes moved across the crowd until they settled on a solitary figure standing near the edge of the square. "Ethan Cole," she said. The man she was looking at seemed as surprised as everyone else. A murmur spread through the crowd. "The hunter? Why him? What does she want with Ethan?" Sarah smiled, but before she could continue, the story of how everything began must be told. 6 months earlier, Ethan Cole lived a life so quiet that many people barely noticed him. His cabin stood deep in the pine-covered hills several miles outside Silver Creek. A narrow trail wound through the forest to reach it. The small home was sturdy but simple, built by Ethan's own hands. A stone chimney rose above the roof. Most mornings began before sunrise. Ethan woke to the sound of wind moving through the trees. He gathered water, tended his fire, and prepared for the day. Sometimes he hunted deer. Sometimes he trapped small game. Other days he explored distant valleys and mountain paths that few people knew existed. He preferred the company of nature to the noise of crowds. At 35 years old, Ethan had become something of a mystery. When he visited town, he spoke politely but rarely stayed long. He purchased supplies, sold furs when necessary, and returned to the hills. He never attended dances, celebrations, or gatherings. Because he kept to himself, rumors followed him. Some believed he had once come from a wealthy family back east. Others insisted he had served as a scout. A few claimed he was hiding from a great mistake. None of them knew the truth. The truth was far less dramatic. Years earlier, Ethan had lost both of his parents during a harsh winter. They had taught him honesty, hard work, and compassion. Their loss left a wound that never completely healed. Afterward, Ethan slowly withdrew from society. Living alone felt easier than risking more heartbreak. Over time, solitude became a habit. Then it became a belief. Eventually, Ethan convinced himself that he simply was not meant for the life other people enjoyed. He watched families grow. He watched couples build futures together. He wished them well, yet never imagined he could have the same happiness. Deep down, he believed no woman would ever choose someone like him. What Ethan failed to realize was that his actions revealed far more about him than his words ever did. During difficult winters, anonymous packages of meat occasionally appeared on the porches of struggling families. Lost travelers somehow found their way back to safe roads after becoming stranded. When storms damaged fences or cabins, someone often repaired the worst damage before sunrise. Most people never discovered who helped them. A few suspected Ethan. He never confirmed it. Recognition held little value to him. One cold afternoon, while delivering supplies to town, Ethan noticed an elderly farmer struggling with a broken wagon wheel. Without hesitation, he stopped and helped make repairs. When the grateful farmer offered payment, Ethan simply shook his head and continued on his way. Yet because he never spoke about them, few understood his character. Far away from town life, another story was unfolding. Sarah Whitmore possessed nearly everything a person could desire. Wealth, influence, beauty, and respect followed her wherever she went. Yet one thing remained absent. She had never found someone she truly trusted. Many men admired her fortune. Many admired her position. Very few seemed interested in the person behind those things. As a result, Sarah had become careful. She listened closely. She observed quietly. She searched for qualities that money could not buy: integrity, humility, kindness. Unfortunately, such qualities were often difficult to find. One autumn morning, Sarah rode into the mountains to inspect a distant section of ranchland. Several workers accompanied her, and the journey began smoothly. By afternoon, dark clouds gathered across the sky. A powerful storm rolled over the hills. Rain fell heavily. Then Sarah's horse became frightened. Before anyone could stop it, the animal bolted down a narrow trail. Within minutes, Sarah was separated from her workers. Alone in unfamiliar terrain, she searched for a safe route back. The storm grew worse. Evening approached. For the first time in years, uncertainty crept into her thoughts. Then she spotted a figure emerging through the rain. A tall man wearing a weathered coat stepped calmly from the trees. It was Ethan Cole. He immediately recognized the danger of the situation. Without asking unnecessary questions, he guided Sarah toward shelter beneath a rocky hillside. There they waited while the worst of the storm passed. Unlike most people, Ethan showed no sign of being impressed by her wealth or status. He spoke respectfully but naturally. No flattery, no special treatment. Just quiet kindness. As the rain softened outside, Sarah found herself curious about the mysterious hunter. And for the first time in many years, Ethan met someone who would soon change his life forever. After the storm passed, Ethan escorted Sarah safely back to the main trail where her worried workers finally found her. The men thanked him repeatedly, but Ethan simply nodded, wished everyone a safe journey, and disappeared into the forest before any further conversation could begin. The encounter should have ended there. At least that was what Ethan believed. For Sarah, however, the brief meeting left a lasting impression. During the ride back to Silver Creek, she found herself thinking about the hunter. It was not because he had rescued her. Many capable men lived in the territory. What stayed in her mind was the way he had treated her. He had spoken to her as if she were an ordinary person rather than the wealthiest landowner in the region. In the weeks that followed, Sarah tried to focus on business. She reviewed cattle reports, met with merchants, and oversaw improvements on her ranches. Yet her thoughts repeatedly returned to Ethan Cole. Eventually, curiosity overcame her. Rather than relying on rumors, she decided to learn the truth for herself. Her investigation began quietly. One afternoon, she visited an elderly widow whose small farm bordered one of her properties. During their conversation, the woman mentioned a difficult winter several years earlier. "I never learned who left food on my porch," the widow said. "Whoever it was saved me from losing everything." Sarah listened carefully. "Did you ever suspect anyone?" The woman smiled. "I always thought it might have been Ethan." A few days later, Sarah heard a similar story from a ranch hand. Years before, he had become lost in the mountains after a snowstorm. "Someone tracked me down and led me home," he explained. "Never asked for payment, never told anyone about it." "Who was it?" Sarah asked. "Ethan Cole." As the days passed, more stories appeared, a family whose fence had been repaired overnight. A traveler guided away from dangerous terrain. A young boy reunited with a missing horse. Different people, different circumstances, the same name, Ethan Cole. Sarah soon realized that the hunter had spent years helping others without seeking recognition. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely unaware that Sarah was asking questions about him throughout Silver Creek. When he noticed Sarah visiting the general store one afternoon, he assumed it was a coincidence. Then it happened again. Before long, their paths crossed often enough that coincidence became difficult to believe. One morning, Sarah approached him near the blacksmith's shop. "I hope you do not mind a question," she said. Ethan looked slightly confused. "Not at all. I was wondering whether you know the northern trails better than anyone else." "Probably." "Would you be willing to show me a route that reaches the eastern valley?" Ethan hesitated. Most people rarely asked for his company. Still, there was nothing unreasonable about the request. "Sure," he replied. That simple conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Over the following months, Sarah found many reasons to spend time outdoors. To Ethan's surprise, he enjoyed the conversations too. Sarah possessed a sharp mind and a genuine interest in people. She asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully to the answers. Unlike many wealthy individuals Ethan had encountered, she never acted superior. Gradually, the awkwardness between them disappeared. Their discussions grew longer. Their laughter became easier. Trust began forming where neither of them expected it. Yet Ethan refused to let himself imagine anything more. Whenever hopeful thoughts appeared, he pushed them away. Sarah belonged to a different world. She owned enormous ranches. She attended important meetings. She influenced decisions across the territory. He was simply a hunter living alone in the mountains. The difference seemed impossible to ignore. One evening, while sitting beside a stream, Ethan found himself watching Sarah skip a small stone across the water. "You look worried," she observed. "I'm fine. You always say that when something is bothering you." Ethan smiled slightly. "Maybe I spend too much time around you. Or maybe not enough." The words lingered in his mind long after they were spoken. Back in Silver Creek, people had started noticing their growing friendship. The town thrived on conversation, and conversation quickly turned into gossip. Some residents were supportive, others were skeptical. A few wealthy men openly mocked the idea that Sarah would spend time with a solitary hunter. Whenever such comments reached Ethan, they reinforced his doubts. Surely Sarah would eventually lose interest. But Sarah paid little attention to public opinion. She had spent years listening to people tell her what she should want. She was tired of it. One afternoon, after a long ride through the hills, she decided to share something personal. They stopped beneath a large oak tree overlooking a valley painted gold by the setting sun. "For years," Sarah said, "people have asked why I never accepted any proposals." Ethan remained silent. "I met successful men, intelligent men, influential men." She paused, but most of them cared more about my fortune than about me. The honesty in her voice surprised him. "I learned something," she continued. "Character matters more than status. Kindness matters more than power." Ethan stared toward the horizon. "Those qualities are harder to find than people think." "Yes," Sarah said softly, "much harder." For a moment neither spoke. The evening breeze moved through the grass. Then Sarah looked directly at him. "You know, Ethan, sometimes the right person is hiding where nobody thinks to look." His heart beat faster. He understood the meaning behind her words, yet fear remained, fear of disappointment, fear of believing something that could never be true. When they finally returned to town that evening, Ethan carried a feeling he had not experienced in years. Hope, small and uncertain, but real. For the first time since losing his parents, he allowed himself to wonder whether a different future might be possible. And for the first time, Sarah believed she had finally found the man she had been searching for all along. Neither knew how much life would change. The annual Silver Creek Community Celebration arrived with clear skies and excitement. Every ranch, farm, and trading post within miles sent people into town for the event. Banners stretched across the main street. Musicians played cheerful tunes while merchants displayed their finest goods. Children laughed, families gathered, and visitors filled every corner of town. For most residents, it was the highlight of the year. For Ethan Cole, it was simply another day he would have preferred to spend in the mountains. He almost decided not to attend. Large gatherings made him uncomfortable, but several townspeople had personally invited him. More importantly, Sarah had asked whether he would be there. That single question convinced him to come. On the morning of the celebration, Ethan arrived early and tied his horse near the edge of town. As he walked through the crowd, he noticed familiar faces greeting him with unexpected warmth. People who once barely acknowledged him now waved. Some thanked him for acts of kindness they had recently learned about. The attention felt strange, yet it also felt good. Unknown to Ethan, Sarah had spent the previous week making an important decision. For months, she had observed him carefully. She had seen how he treated strangers. She had seen how he helped others when nobody was watching. She had seen his honesty, patience, and humility. Most importantly, she had seen the goodness he failed to recognize in himself. Years earlier, she had promised herself that she would never marry simply because society expected it. If she ever chose a husband, it would be someone she genuinely respected. Now she knew exactly who that person was. As the afternoon progressed, the entire town gathered near the courthouse for the traditional closing ceremony. The mayor welcomed visitors and thanked local families for their contributions to the community. Several awards were presented. Then the mayor stepped aside. "There is one more speaker today," he announced. Sarah Whitmore walked onto the platform. Immediately, the crowd became attentive. Whenever Sarah spoke, people listened. She stood confidently before the townspeople. "Silver Creek has given me many blessings," she began. "Friends, opportunities, and a place to call home." The crowd nodded politely. At first, her speech sounded ordinary. Then her tone became more personal. "Over the years, many people have asked me why I never married." A ripple of curiosity moved through the audience. Even Ethan looked up. "The answer is simple," she continued. "I was waiting for the right person." Now the crowd was completely silent. No one knew where the speech was leading. Sarah slowly scanned the audience until her eyes settled on a familiar figure standing near the back. Ethan Cole? His name echoed across the square. Ethan froze. Hundreds of people turned toward him. A murmur swept through the crowd. The hunter? What is happening? Confused, Ethan remained where he stood. Sarah smiled gently. Would you please come forward? Every instinct urged him to disappear into the crowd, but there was something in her expression that made him step forward. The townspeople parted to let him pass. Whispers followed him all the way to the courthouse steps. When he finally reached the front, he looked at Sarah with complete uncertainty. She met his gaze. Then she addressed the crowd once more. When I first met Ethan, I knew almost nothing about him. Most people didn't. Several listeners nodded. He was quiet, reserved, easy to overlook if you only paid attention to appearances. Sarah paused, but character reveals itself through actions. She began sharing stories. The families he had helped, the travelers he had guided home, the repairs he had completed without seeking credit. The kindness he had shown year after year. Many people had heard these stories individually. Hearing them together created a powerful picture. The crowd grew emotional. Ethan stood speechless. He never expected his private acts of kindness to become public knowledge. Sarah then turned toward him directly. Ethan, you spent years believing that nobody noticed you. His eyes widened. You spent years helping people without expecting anything in return. The square remained silent. You spent years seeing value in everyone except yourself. Ethan felt his throat tighten. No one had ever understood him so completely. Sarah took a slow breath. For a long time, I searched for a man worthy of my trust. She smiled. I searched among wealthy men. A few people laughed softly. I searched among powerful men. More smiles appeared. And all along, the man I was looking for was living quietly in the hills. Gasps spread through the crowd. Many people suddenly realized what was about to happen. Ethan did too. His heart pounded. Sarah stepped closer. Ethan Cole, you are the kindest and most honorable man I have ever known. Tears appeared in the eyes of several onlookers. Will you marry me? For one astonishing moment, time seemed to stop. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The most powerful woman in the territory had just proposed to a lonely hunter. The entire town stood frozen in disbelief. Ethan stared at her. For years, he had convinced himself that love belonged to other people. For years, he had believed that no woman would ever choose him. Now the woman he admired most was standing before him, offering him the future he never dared imagine. Emotion overwhelmed him. He glanced at the crowd, then back at Sarah. Finally, he smiled. It was a genuine smile, brighter than any most people had ever seen. Yes, he said. The single word broke the silence. Cheers erupted across the square. Applause thundered through town. People laughed, celebrated, and congratulated them. Even those who had doubted Ethan could not hide their happiness. Sarah's face lit up with joy. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt completely accepted. The celebration continued long into the evening. Music filled the streets. Everywhere they went, people offered congratulations. In the months that followed, Ethan and Sarah planned a simple wedding. Despite her wealth, Sarah wanted the ceremony to reflect what mattered most to both of them: family, friendship, and community. The wedding became one of the happiest days Silver Creek had ever witnessed. After their marriage, very little changed about Ethan's character. He remained humble. He continued helping neighbors. He still spent time in the mountains he loved. The difference was that he no longer walked through life alone. Years later, Ethan and Sarah often sat together on the porch of their ranch house watching sunsets spread across the western sky. One evening, a young boy visiting the ranch asked Ethan a question. "Mr. Cole, how did you convince Miss Sarah to marry you?" The old hunter laughed softly, then he looked at Sarah before answering. "I didn't convince her." The boy appeared confused. Ethan smiled. "She simply saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." The boy thought about that answer for a moment. Sarah reached for Ethan's hand. Together, they watched the sun disappear beyond the distant hills. The journey that began with loneliness had ended with love, respect, and belonging. Throughout Silver Creek, people remembered an important lesson. True worth is not measured by wealth, status, or popularity. Sometimes the most extraordinary person is the one quietly helping others when nobody is looking. And sometimes all it takes is one person to recognize that hidden value and change a life forever.